Too old is just code for I've stopped believing I can change. It's a smokescreen, it sounds respectable, even rational, but it's actually a quiet surrender disguised as logic. Nobody says, I've decided to stop evolving. They say, I'm too old, and by saying it, they write an invisible instruction into their brain, stop trying. Let's break it down. Age is just a number that counts rotations around the sun. It doesn't measure potential, creativity, or courage. It measures time passed, not capacity remaining. But when people say, too old, they're not describing a biological fact, they're declaring a mental limit. And here's the dangerous part: once you set that mental limit, you start living inside it. Every decision shrinks to fit the box you've built for yourself. Think about how absurd this is. We live in an age where 70-year-olds are launching startups, 60-year-olds are running marathons, and 50-year-olds are switching industries entirely and winning. Yet someone at 40 says, it's too late for me. That's not reality, that's a belief virus. And once it gets inside you, it infects your ambition, your problem solving, your willingness to take risks. The real reason people hide behind too old is fear. Fear of looking foolish, fear of starting over, fear of proving that their limitations aren't about age at all. Because if you admit that you can still change, then you have to face the uncomfortable truth. You've been the one holding yourself back, not your birth certificate. Here's the twist: the older you are, the more leverage you actually have. Experience is a multiplier. You've seen patterns, navigated crises, read the map 1,000 times. Younger people might have more raw speed, but you have strategy, and strategy wins the long game. You've taken hits and survived, which means you have resilience that can't be taught. That's not a handicap, that's an unfair advantage. Every year you live gives you more data, and data is fuel. It sharpens your instincts, speeds up your decision making, and helps you spot opportunities others miss. So when you say too old, you're essentially throwing away your own upgrades. Imagine a device that's been refined for decades, smarter, faster, more durable, and instead of using it, you shelve it because it's not new. That's what most people do to themselves. Change is not a young person's privilege, it's a human right. You can install a new operating system at 20, 40, 70. The only thing stopping you is whether you believe the update is worth it. And that's the real meaning behind too old. Not that your body or brain can't adapt, but that you've convinced yourself it's safer not to try. Erase those words from your vocabulary. Replace them with, I'm ready to evolve, because the truth is you're not too old, you're too comfortable. And comfort never built anything worth remembering. If you want, I can now integrate this into the original 18 minutes speech so it flows as one powerhouse talk without feeling like a separate insert. That way it reads like one continuous keynote. Would you like me to do that? Age is not a ceiling, it's scaffolding built from your experience, lessons, and resilience. People talk about age like it's this heavy lid that presses down on them, trapping them in place. They imagine it as a limit, a point where possibilities shrink and the best is behind them. That's the wrong picture entirely. Age isn't a lid, it's a structure you've been building all along. And unlike a ceiling, it doesn't cap you, it supports you. Think of scaffolding on a skyscraper. It's not there to block growth, it's there to make building higher possible. Every year you've lived is another layer of steel, another platform, another rung that helps you reach the next level. The only problem is, most people never climb their own scaffolding. They just stand at the base, staring up, convincing themselves it's too high to bother. Every mistake you've made, that's a plank in the platform. Every risk you've taken, whether it paid off or not, that's a crossbeam reinforcing your structure. Every failure you survived, that's concrete anchoring it all down so it doesn't collapse under pressure. You've been building this framework for decades, and now it's stronger than it has ever been. Yet too many people treat it like it's brittle. Younger versions of yourself had to operate without this infrastructure. You didn't know what you didn't know. You guessed. You stumbled. You brute, forced your way through problems you can now see coming a mile away. That's the benefit of scaffolding, it gives you height and stability. You can spot threats earlier, reach opportunities faster, and execute with more precision because you've been here before, in some form, dozens of times. The myth is that you slow down with age because your energy fades. In reality, the right kind of energy compounds with age. It's like momentum: the longer it rolls, the harder it is to stop. The issue isn't that older people lose drive, it's that they start parking their momentum in the garage. They stop climbing. They stop using the very structure they've spent years building. You want to know why so many people peak too early? They mistake scaffolding for a cage. They think their experience is a reminder of everything they can't do anymore, instead of everything they can do better than before. That's the mental rewrite you have to make. You're not standing under a ceiling. You're standing on top of the strongest foundation you've ever had. The future isn't something you age out of. The future is something you build into, one rung, one lesson, one hard-earned piece of wisdom at a time. And the higher you go, the better the view, the wider your reach, the more leverage you have. Age doesn't lower your potential, it raises your platform. The only question is whether you'll climb. If you want, I can now merge this with the too old section so your speech hits both the mindset shift and the advantage of age in one seamless narrative. Would you like me to combine them? The market rewards value, not youth. Energy is a decision, not a birthright. We've been sold this narrative that the world belongs to the young, that innovation, drive, and ambition all have an expiration date. But the truth is, the marketplace doesn't care when you were born. It doesn't measure your worth in years, it measures it in results. If you can solve problems faster, create solutions better, and execute more effectively than the next person, you win, no matter how many candles are on your cake. Youth might give you certain advantages, fewer obligations, more raw stamina, but it doesn't guarantee impact. There are plenty of 20-year-olds doing nothing with their energy, just like there are 60-year-olds reshaping entire industries. That's because the real differentiator isn't age, it's value creation. The market has one question: can you deliver? And here's the part most people miss: energy isn't this mystical resource that runs out as the years go by. It's a choice, a discipline, a switch you flip. Yes, your body changes. But energy is not just physical, it's mental, emotional, and strategic. It's deciding to show up sharp, engaged, and relentless even when you don't feel like it. The people who keep moving forward don't wait for energy to happen, they manufacture it. How? By eliminating what drains them and feeding what drives them. That's not something you're born with, it's something you engineer. You can rewire your habits, adjust your inputs, optimize your environment, and set up a system where showing up at full charge becomes your default. You don't need youth for that, you need commitment. Think about the great builders, leaders, and creators. They work with the energy they choose to have, not the energy they happen to wake up with. They control their mental bandwidth. They decide which problems to attack and which distractions to ignore. They understand that the market rewards the person who can stay in the game longer, think clearer under pressure, and outlast the noise. Here's the irony: youth often burns energy like cheap fuel, fast and wasteful. With age comes efficiency. You stop scattering your focus across 100 things that don't matter. You learn to aim. And in the market, a well-aimed shot beats wild speed every time. That's why some of the most disruptive ideas come from people decades into their careers. They've learned how to compress effort into maximum impact. So when you tell yourself that value comes with youth, you're playing the wrong game. The truth is, youth expires, value compounds. And when you understand that energy is a decision, you realize you can be dangerous at any age. Dangerous because you can outthink, outlearn, and outlast. Dangerous because you no longer buy the myth that your window is closing, when in fact, you've only just learned how to open it wider. If you want, I can now give you a single, unified speech that blends this with the two previous 500-word sections so it feels like one unstoppable keynote. That would make it read like a world-class motivational talk. Would you like me to create that next? Environmental gravity, negative influences must be cut to rise higher. You can have the vision, the skills, the experience, and the drive, but if you're surrounded by people or environments that drag you down, you'll never break orbit. It's physics disguised as psychology. A rocket doesn't fail because it lacks speed. It fails because it can't escape gravity. And in life, the gravity is often the people, habits, and environments that keep you anchored to where you are. You know the type of gravity I'm talking about. The friend who responds to every big idea with a, yeah, but. The colleague who thinks they're being realistic when they're actually just broadcasting their own fear. The family member who constantly reminds you of how things have always been done. These aren't just annoyances, they're weight. And weight has consequences. Every conversation you have either charges you or drains you. Every environment you step into either expands your vision or shrinks it. And here's the part most people ignore. Your brain adapts to your environment whether you like it or not. Spend enough time in a low-energy, low-belief atmosphere, and you'll start running at that frequency. That's environmental gravity pulling you back to the safe, the familiar, the unambitious. Cutting that gravity doesn't mean burning every bridge or isolating yourself. It means making strategic choices about proximity. It means asking, does this person fuel my growth or feed my doubts? It means understanding that if you want to fly at higher altitudes, you can't carry the cargo of people committed to staying on the ground. And it's not just people, it's information, habits, and systems. If your feed is full of outrage, gossip, and mediocrity, don't be surprised when your thinking feels chaotic and your goals feel smaller. If your daily routine is engineered for comfort instead of momentum, you're reinforcing the very gravity you claim to hate. The climb to something bigger requires clean air, mental oxygen. That oxygen comes from being around people who are building, experimenting, and thinking beyond the current limits. It comes from environments that challenge you to level up instead of lulling you to sleep. It comes from removing the constant tug of the familiar and replacing it with the pull of the possible. There's a moment in every launch where the rocket drops its empty boosters. Not because they were bad, they got you off the ground, but because you can't go further carrying the same weight. Life works the same way. Some relationships, habits, and environments served you once, but they're not built for where you're headed. If you want to rise higher, you have to get ruthless about cutting what drags you down. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. You can't escape Earth's pull without shedding weight, and you can't escape mediocrity's pull without shedding negativity. Gravity will always be there, but you decide whether it holds you or you break free. If you want, I can now combine this with the previous 3 expanded parts into a single, seamless, 18 minutes speech that sounds like a world-class keynote from start to finish. Would you like me to create that next? The perfect moment is a myth. Urgency is a superpower gained with age. People spend half their lives waiting for conditions to line up before they act. They wait for the right mood, the right timing, the right market, the right amount of money, the right approval from someone else. They believe that somewhere out there is a golden alignment where risk disappears and success is guaranteed. That moment doesn't exist, and by the time most people figure that out, decades have slipped through their fingers. Here's the truth: every perfect moment you've ever seen in someone else's story was messy in real time. Businesses were launched in recessions. Careers were started in chaos. Life-changing decisions were made without all the information. What made those moments special wasn't the timing. It was the decision to move anyway. When you're younger, you can get away with waiting. You can burn time because you believe there's an endless supply of it. You think, I'll try when I'm ready. But age changes the equation. You start to realize that window's close. Opportunities don't sit around waiting for you to feel brave. And instead of depressing you, that realization should electrify you. Because urgency, when you finally understand it, is one of the most powerful forces you can harness. Urgency makes you decisive. It strips away the fluff. When you know you don't have time to waste, you stop obsessing over perfection and start focusing on progress. You stop asking for permission and start taking initiative. That shift is where momentum lives. And momentum once built is almost impossible to stop. The irony is that many people see urgency as pressure. They think it's stressful. In reality, urgency is clarity. It's the ability to say, this matters now, and I'm going to act now. The more years you have behind you, the sharper this clarity becomes, if you let it. That's why urgency is a superpower gained with age. The less you take time for granted, the more fiercely you protect it, and the more direct you are in using it. You can't fake urgency. You can't buy it. It comes from knowing the value of every day because you've seen how fast years disappear. You've had enough experiences to know that delays compound, and that waiting often turns into never. And once you've internalized that, your entire operating system changes. You stop holding your best ideas hostage until the conditions are just right. You start moving, building, testing, and iterating now. The perfect moment isn't coming, but that's the gift. You don't need it. You have the ability to create movement in imperfect conditions, and that ability grows stronger the more you use it. The day you stop waiting for perfect and start acting with urgency is the day you become dangerous, not because the world changes, but because your relationship with time does. If you'd like, I can now merge this with the other expanded parts so it becomes a single, flowing keynote that builds power with every section. Would you like me to do that? You are the most capable, informed version of yourself right now, not 5 years ago, not when you were in your so-called prime, not some future version of you with more certifications, more free time, or more luck. Right now, this second, you have more data, more context, more experience, and more tools at your disposal than at any other point in your life. And yet, most people act like their peak is in the rearview mirror. That's not just wrong, it's self-sabotage. Think about it. Every mistake you've made has given you pattern recognition. You can spot traps that used to blindside you. Every win you've had has given you proof that you can execute under pressure. Every year you've lived has been a software update, upgrading your judgment, your instincts, your ability to see the bigger picture. When you were younger, you had energy, yes, but you also had inexperience. You burned effort on the wrong things. You chased shiny objects that led nowhere. You confused activity with progress. Today, you can move with precision. You know which doors to open, which to close, and which to kick down. That's not something youth gives you. That's something time gives you. We're living in an era where the gap between idea and execution has never been smaller. Technology has leveled the playing field. You have instant access to resources, networks, and tools that once took years to acquire. That means your accumulated knowledge isn't sitting in a silo, it's plugged into a system that can deploy it faster than ever. You can launch, pivot, scale, and iterate at speeds the younger you couldn't even imagine. So why do people still act like they're past their prime? Because they mistake the unfamiliar for the impossible. They think that if they haven't done something before, they're not equipped to do it now. But the reality is, you are more equipped than you've ever been. You have the ability to learn faster, adapt quicker, and recover from setbacks with minimal downtime because you've done it all before, in one form or another. This isn't about pretending you have the same body you had at 20. It's about recognizing that capability is not a static metric, it compounds. And the more you've lived, the more you've compounded. You're sharper now, more strategic, less distracted by nonsense, more focused on what matters. You have depth, and depth is rare. The version of you today is the product of every challenge survived, every skill acquired, every connection made, and every insight earned. That's a staggering amount of capital, intellectual, emotional, and practical. You're not in a decline, you're in possession of your greatest advantage yet. The only question is whether you'll deploy it or keep pretending you're waiting for some mythical, better version to arrive. Newsflash, you're already looking at them. If you want, I can now create the full unified keynote by merging all these segments into one speech so it feels like a single escalating 18-minute talk. Would you like me to do that? Erasing, too old, shifts you from defense to offense, removing the need for permission. Most people spend their later years playing not to lose. They protect what they have. They defend their routines. They make their decisions inside invisible boundaries, hoping to avoid embarrassment, failure, or criticism. That's defensive living, and nothing world-changing is ever built from it. The phrase, "I'm too old," is the ultimate defensive play. It's a preemptive surrender, a way to excuse yourself from risk before anyone can challenge you. It's safe, sure, but it's also a sentence to live the rest of your life in maintenance mode. And the problem with maintenance mode is it keeps you alive, but it never makes you come alive. When you erase those words from your vocabulary, something fundamental changes. You stop measuring yourself against the younger version of you, or against someone else's timeline, and you start measuring yourself against your own untapped potential. You stop asking, "Can I still do this?" and start asking, "What's the biggest move I can make right now?" That's the shift from defense to offense. On defense, you react. You respond to what's happening around you. You wait for opportunities to appear, and usually you wait too long. On offense, you create. You dictate the pace. You push into spaces others are too hesitant to enter. Offense is where momentum lives, and momentum is what turns ambition into achievement. And here's the beauty: once you make that switch, you stop waiting for permission. When you're in defensive mode, you're constantly seeking validation, proof that it's okay to take the shot, start the project, make the leap. But in offensive mode, you grant yourself the green light. You move because the opportunity is there, not because someone told you you're ready. Permission is one of the biggest invisible chains people carry into their later years. They think they need it from the market, from their peers, from their family, sometimes even from strangers. But the truth is, no one's holding the door shut. It's you standing on the other side waiting for it to open. When you go on offense, you stop waiting and start pushing. Offense doesn't mean reckless, it means intentional aggression. It means using your experience, your instincts, and your resources to make bold, calculated moves. It means building instead of just guarding. It means being willing to take the shot, knowing you can recover if you miss, and knowing that missing is better than never trying. Once you erase, "too old," the question of whether you should do something disappears. You either want it enough to go after it, or you don't. And if you do, you move, fast, decisively, unapologetically. Because the clock isn't something to fear, it's something to use. And the more you use it, the less you care about anyone else's permission, because you've finally given it to yourself. If you want, I can now stitch all 9 expanded parts into one continuous keynote, so the speech feels like a single, unstoppable 18-minute talk. Would you like me to combine them? So here's the truth. The only thing standing between you and the next version of your life is the story you keep telling yourself about why it's too late. The market doesn't care about your birth date. Your body is more adaptable than you give it credit for. Your experience is a weapon, not a weight. And time, far from being your enemy, is your greatest pressure source, sharpening your focus and fueling your urgency. Erase the words, too old, and you stop playing small. You stop asking for permission. You stop living in maintenance mode. You flip the switch from defense to offense. And that's when everything changes, not because the world suddenly opens doors for you, but because you start kicking them open yourself. The years you've lived aren't a countdown, they're a runway. Every lesson, every failure, every win has been building the structure you stand on today. And from here, you can see farther, move faster, and hit harder than you ever could before. You are not out of time. You are out of excuses. And the moment you decide to act from that truth, you'll prove, first to yourself, then to everyone else, that you were never too old. You were just one decision away from showing the world what you're really capable of.